Hello YouTube, and welcome to this second hypertrophy log. Today focused on my leg day. If you have missed the previous installments, they're both in the description for you. The numero 0 was actually training in nature, and the numero uno was an arm day that I posted last week. But today we're going to start getting down and dirty because we're talking lower body, and your lower body days are the indications of whether or not you are a serious lifter, because well, many people have a lot of love and passion for the game when it comes to training biceps and chest, and that is great. When it's time to actually crush their legs, they are nowhere to be seen, they skip, or they do some half-hearted bullshit. You will see today that this is not the case. And actually, you are in luck because you are going to get 2 for the price of 1. So you'll actually see 2 of my leg days for a very simple reason. It's because my leg days are much shorter than my upper body days because they're much more intense. It's something I've been preaching on this channel for a long time. Your leg days should be roughly 60 to 70% of your upper body days in terms of exercise selection. So for me, since I do from 6 to 8 exercises on my upper body days, naturally I do between 4 to 5 exercises on the lower bodies. So we're going to cover 2 of these days today, starting with the first one that opens with a Romanian deadlift. Also, there will be an update about my bulk at the end of the episode where I'll discuss my current weight, my goals, and where I want to go moving forward, so stay tuned for that. So the bit of footage that you saw in the intro was just me warming up, nothing complicated. I do not stretch, I do not do mobility work. The only thing I do to prepare for a big lift is I simply do that lift with less weight. So with RDLs, I'll do from 4 to 5 sets, with low weight, and I'll add 50 pounds every single set until I get to my top set. And the top set for the day is, from what I remember, 395 pounds, and the rep range is between 6 to 12. The reason why I open with an RDL is because every single lower body day either opens with a heavy knee flexion or a heavy hip hinge. And depending on the one, it's going to dictate the rest of the day, and it has to be extremely intense. So it's either rep in reserve 1 or rep in reserve 0 for RDL. I often go to failure because I find that the RDL is an extremely safe movement, at least for my build. So these RDLs are extremely tough, they're extremely strenuous, but that's the way to go about it. That's how you get big legs and a big lower body. It has to be hard. And I pause before the last rep, I take a few breaths, then I go and I give everything that I have to get that last squeeze of hypertrophy, and that is that. That is my first set. I re-rack the bar and I am done. I'm going to do from 1 to 3 more sets following that one set, depending on how I feel. So I always do between 2 to 4 sets for RDLs because I find that this movement is great for stimulus. Sometimes 2 sets is really all you need. If I manage to get 12 reps on my first set today, I would most likely go to 3 to 4 sets in total. And then next week, I will go in and do only 2 sets and I'll get maybe 8 and 7 reps. But because I would have gone up in weight, the stimulus would have been matched and the progress would have continued. And that's that for the first exercise of the day. So usually, the way I program for my lower body days is the first exercise is never in a superset or giant set, because it is strenuous and I want to put 100% of my effort into it. You can still superset that movement with things like calves, neck, abs, if you feel like it won't damage your ability to stay rigid and to actually protect your core. You can even do real delt. All small muscles work perfectly fine, and usually I superset with neck, but the day that you're seeing right now is right after I did my arm day, and as you might have remembered, I hurt my neck, so I couldn't train neck on that day. I'll make up for it later on, but on that day I only did RDLs, and then I moved on to the second lines of set, which this time is a giant set. So the way I program my lower body days is super simple. If I open with a heavy hip hinge that hits the hamstring, the next movement, the next heavy movement of the day will be a knee flexion, and this is why you are watching me right now do these heavy Bulgarian split squats. I've told you in the past how effective these are. Yes, they are very hard, but again, this is the point. Most likely, if an exercise in your routine for your lower body is not hard, it is not going to give you any results. Do not dodge difficulty. These are a torture, but they work incredibly well. I Always advise you do them with an elevated leg so as to put all of the stress on the leg that is forward. And as you can see, the range of motion is complete because what limits the range of motion is the dumbbells touching the floor. This is my personal preference when it comes to that exercise. And I also recommend that you guys wear straps because it would be stupid to let your grip limit your ability to kill your legs. Even if it's quote unquote lightweight, if at any point you feel that your grip is failing, fuck it, strap up. This is a leg exercise. Now, if you look at my foot placement, you will notice that I keep my foot straight, so I don't rotate it so as to limit the amount of external hip rotation, so as to make sure I don't use too much glutes and hamstrings. This is as pure quads as possible. You see that the knee travels forward, and you see also here that it's a rep range that tops at 12, and in the same line, if I got 12, I would go up in weight next time, but this time I did not get 12, so I will just repeat that same weight next time until I get a PR, and then I will eventually progress. And after that quad exercise, I move on directly to a calf isolation exercise. It is not fun because I am tired, my quads are on fire, I just want to rest, but it's a giant set and hitting calves after quads does not limit performance. So since I have a home gym, the way I hit calves is I have a block for my calves to get more range of motion. I put weight on my knees, this time it's an easy bar, and I just go at it. And even though it looks like the range of motion is not that great, it is my preferred range of motion for the simple reason that the calves are active throughout it. And if you look at the bottom of my foot in the footage, I never touch the floor. That is very important. That way I don't release tension on the calves. The calves are under tension throughout the movement. And so I know that every single rep actually counts. You also notice that the tempo is slow with a pause at the bottom so as to not rebound too much and not use my Achilles tendon. This is super, super key. If you do not do that, most likely your calf training is going to be for nothing. And this comes from someone who has ignored calf training for years, and look at the result. My calves are 17 inches plus and they look puny. Why? Because when you have big upper legs, if your calves don't match, you are going to look like you have stick for calves. So don't make the mistake that I did and actually kill yourself. I do not count reps on these. So I aim for 15, but if I can get more, I get more, and then I add more weight. I go until I literally cannot go anymore, and then I press with my hands on the weight to stretch the calves more, and then I re-rack the weight and the set is done. And that was that for the first day. So as you see on paper, it's nice, quick and easy, but in execution and in practice, it is far from that. Even though I only did 3 exercises, this is much more difficult and strenuous than any of my upper body days where I do 7 exercises because lower body is really hard. You will see that throughout these logs, you're going to get to learn more. And actually, we're going to jump into another one right now because we're going to jump into another one of my lower body days. So for that day, in the opposite logic, I'm going to open with a heavy knee flexion because 48 hours prior, I opened with a heavy hip hinge with the RDL. So the knee flexion I selected for the day is a pose SSB squat, where I use that safety bar to get more stability and be able to have a proper pose at the bottom. This is a movement that stretches the quads tremendously. It also recruits the upper back a lot and the thoracic spine. It's a movement that I enjoy a lot, and you can really, really push to failure because the weight sits above mid-foot, and so there is no risk of losing your balance as there could be with a straight bar. So you'll see that I'm actually going to take that set quite deep into the red zone, into the failure territory. The reps slow down a ton, but you notice that the tempo of the negative never ever changes. The tempo is always the same. So the only indication that I'm coming close to failure is the fact that the positive slows down to a crawl. That is when I know it is time to re-rack the bar and move on to the rest of the day. Now on that day, unlike the previous one, I'm actually going to superset that big exercise. And I'm going to superset it with a rib / intercostal muscle / serratus exercise and also a neck exercise. But before that, of course, a flex and a taking off of the shirts because it's a bodybuilding channel. I have to show off the goods, right? So the movement you're going to see me do right now with the cable is one that I've been doing for the past 3 years for my ribs, because I broke both my ribs on each side doing squats, and I've been doing that rehab exercise ever since, and it's a lifesaver. It is incredible. It's a form of serratus punch done with hip rotation, where I allow the rib to really stretch at the bottom. I highly recommend that movement. It's very easy to set up. You just tie up a band around a rack and you do exactly what you see me do here. It is a natural movement that feels extremely good on the ribs and on the serratus muscles in particular. It prevents injuries and it also helps with defining that area, so why not do it? And then after that, I'm going to breathe a bit because it's 100 degrees in the garage and leg days are a bitch even when it's not warm. Then I do some neck. So this neck exercise in particular is one that I like to do for the back of the neck and for the upper back and traps. And it's done with minimal neck flexion. So I tie the band, the towel is there to prevent the band from slipping. And as you see, the movement is initiated by my trunk. It actually is the hips that hinge forward. And my neck resists the tension by simply having the head move back and forth. I really, really like this exercise. It feels much more natural than laying on your belly and doing some movements of the neck with a plate on the back of your head. I've always liked it better like this, less injury risk, and overall you also get a much better contraction and a better stretch. So I recommend that you attempt to do them in that fashion. If you want to train your neck, always remember that supersetting neck is hyper easy because the neck is almost never recruited in any movement. Look at the movement I was doing previously. It was an SSB bar squat where the weight actually rests on my yoke and my neck, and it did not stop me from supersetting. So don't come up with excuses and just train your fucking neck. And likewise here, I actually did 3 sets of squats plus the sets of neck and serratus punches. So this is what opens the leg day. And once that is done, I go on to the second giant set. So for every leg day, it is the same principle. I never do more than 2 lines of giant set, and I never do more than 5 exercises max. Usually it is 4. So here the exercises selected, you can already guess, because since I opened with a knee flexion, you are supposed to see a hip hinge that follows. But the hip hinge that I did on that day is very, very special. And that is a single leg Romanian deadlift. Probably my favorite hamstring exercise. One that is underrated because naturally many people don't know how to do them or they don't have the equipment. If you have a belt squat machine, you are golden because it's the best way to do them. But if you don't have one, I'm going to teach you a way to do them. But first, let me explain to you why I do that. So I find that single leg RDLs are the perfect hamstring exercise because they don't tax the lower back, they don't tax the hips. They actually help externally rotate at the hip without putting tension on the joints. So it actually is a rehab exercise as well. And in terms of hypertrophy, it is killer because it is going to stretch your hamstrings. There's no way around that. Since you cannot rely on lower back or glutes that much, the hamstrings have to do the job. The way you do them is you stop when your torso is parallel with the floor and you hold on to something to make sure that your balance doesn't become an issue. So if you have a belt squat machine, do them like I do them. If you don't, either hold on to a rack with one hand and then have a dumbbell in the other hand, or you tie an elastic band, a strong resistance band around your waist, then around the rack so that it pulls you backwards and it prevents you from falling forward, and you do them with 2 dumbbells. That way you can move on a shit ton of weight and you get all of the benefits of the exercise without having to worry about falling on your face in front of your gym crush. And as you can see, because I'm not wearing a lot of clothes, my lower body is fucking gigantic. Why? Because I train lower body hard with heavy compounds. That is as simple as this. Anyone can get that level of result if you just follow that. I find that when it comes to leg day, isolations are important, but compounds are going to be 80 to 90% of the work. So really push them hard, be safe with them and do them properly with no ego, and you're going to get amazing results. And also a complete physique, because if you want to look like an ogre, you want to look like a monster, if you have tiny legs on top of a gigantic upper body, it's going to look quite silly. Just a little warning regarding single leg RDLs, they are essentially the equivalent of split squats for the hamstrings, meaning that they are horribly difficult. So you're going to hate me for even recommending that movement to you, but your hamstrings are going to thank you down the line, and you're also going to thank me. After that, in the same line of logic, I hit calves. You want your calves to grow, you have to hit them frequently and hard. So every leg day is also calf day for me. This time it's a variation done with a dumbbell. With the dumbbell, it allows me to put the weight much closer to the top of my kneecap, which allows the stretch to be much more in line with the lower leg, and I find that it actually helps me recruit more calves. I also do them with a much closer stance because naturally that way I can actually hold the dumbbell, which stretches the calves in a different fashion, so that way I don't risk to injure myself. There's no obvious injury risk. And the logic here is that since I am capped by the weight of the dumbbell, I accumulate stress by pushing on the dumbbell with my hands. So if you look at the placement of my hands on the dumbbell, once the camera pans up, you will see that I'm not holding the dumbbell to prevent it from falling. I'm actively pushing on it during the negative. Then I have a small pause at the bottom where I'm essentially trying to make myself fail and fall off the block, and the calves have to stretch to catch it. And then I repeat in the same line of thinking. You see that the heel never actually touches the floor. So the calves are under constant tension. I also find that this is a good way to make calf training fun. Many people dodge it because it's boring. It's only boring because you don't push it hard. But if you actually pushed until your calves were screaming in pain, I think you would start to develop a form of connection with the movement, just like you did with chest training or bicep training, because you get a crazy pump and it feels good. So do the same to your calves, and I guarantee you are going to start liking the work. And then to wrap up that day, another exercise and muscle group that is often neglected, the neck. So on that day, I double dipped on neck training because I skipped the week before because of injury. So after working the back of the neck, now I'm training the front of the neck, which is super important for aesthetics of the body, but also facial aesthetics, because when people look at your face, they also look at your neck. You see that I do them across the bench so as to have my head fully floating above the bench and not resting on it, along with the neck. That way the neck has to do the work. And you also notice that my tempo is very slow. The slower the tempo is, the less weight you have to use, which is great because you don't want to have to stack 3 45-pound plates on your face to be able to get stimulus. You can just slow down the tempo and even add pressure with your hands, which is what I'm doing during the negative, and you can still get pretty good results. And that concludes these 2 lower body days, these 2 leg days. So you see that my style is more focused on intensity than volume. I prefer to do quality sets rather than a million exercises. That is, of course, made possible by my high frequency training, because when you hit legs 3 times a week every 48 hours, so for example, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, it becomes much easier because the numbers compound. If you look at the days in isolation, you could think, well, that's not much. But if you look at the week in its globality, since I do a minimum of 2 heavy lower body exercises per day, that is 6 to 8 sets per lower body day, multiplied by 3, that is actually a total of 18 to 24 sets of lower body work a week. And after that, it's up to me to decide how many of these are knee flexions and how many of these are hip hinges. But if you do them heavy and you do them intensely, that is plenty. It is enough to grow for most people. Like I did in the first installment of these hypertrophy logs, here are the 4 days for you guys. I understand that it can be a little bit difficult to follow the entire program by listening to me plus looking at me do the exercises. So that way you can have a visual aid. And as you can see, it is extremely simple. It is 1 heavy exercise for knee flexion or hip hinge, followed by an exercise that is an antagonist, and then muscles like the neck, the abs, the calves that are trained in superset, giant set, along with that muscle. And the reason why you don't see exercises for the biceps or for the triceps on these days is because I follow a gentleman's split, so it's an everyday split. That is a template that follows an upper-lower. So on my lower days, I might sneak in some traps or some neck or some abs, but I will never train big muscle groups like the chest because these are upper body muscles. On my lower days, I want to stay hyper-focused on the posterior chain and the quads. This is the approach that to me is best for recovery, for performance, and therefore for growth. And now let's move on to the bulk update that I promised. So if you haven't followed, I was recamping for 2 to 3 years. I was at 210, and once I got to a physique that I felt was good enough as a base to start putting on mass, I started a bulk. I think it was of November of last year. And in the time span from last November, I put on 5 pounds. And you could tell me, okay, that's not much, and you are correct. But keep in mind that I was already 210 with a lot of mass. I believe that the more advanced you are in bodybuilding, the slower the bulk should be, because the higher chance there is of you just putting on fat. I see too many advanced lifters who make that mistake, who think that they're going to put on 10 pounds of lean mass in like 2 or 3 months of bulking. That is physiologically impossible. If you're 200 pounds, 10 pounds is already a solid 5% of your total body mass. Not muscle mass, body mass. So the chances of that being lean mass is 0%. You're just going to get fat. There is no point. The goal of a bulk is not to gain weight. It's to be in a caloric surplus to promote performance in the gym and to promote progression. Once that occurs, you will put on weight, and then that weight will be lean mass. And I think that this is something that I accomplished pretty well, because look at my physique. That is 5 pounds added, but I did not add that much fat. Of course, I gained some fat, but look at my six-pack. Look at the veins. I did not enter what some people would call a fluffy state just to gain muscle. I understand some people like that state. I do not like it. It doesn't work for me. What works for me is slow and steady. Now, in terms of what I want to improve in this bulk, the shoulders are an obvious client, an obvious weak point, because they're almost as big as my upper arm, which is not normal. It's still the physique that I prefer, but I want them to get bigger, and I'm working actively on it. They have actually started to round up a lot more to get more defined, so I'm very happy with that. The triceps in particular need to improve because they're getting dwarfed by the arm, and I'm already at 18 inches arms, so imagine how big my arms are going to get once the triceps catch up even a little bit. And then in other areas that I want to improve, I think that the forearms also need to grow, but that is more of an obsession of mine. The rest of the upper body in general, I mean, the core, the chest is humongous, the traps are big, the biceps are big. These things are still going to grow, and they're growing regardless of what I do because they're strong points. So I'm not going to focus on them, but with the bulk, they're going to come up naturally. And when it comes to the direction in which I want to take the bulk, because I know that that's what people want to know, right? How long are you going to bulk? How much weight do you want to gain? The answer is, I don't know and I don't care. I will be continuously bulking for as long as I can. I will most likely stay on that bulk for 3 years with a weight gain of maybe half a pound to a pound a month. And again, if you think that that's nothing, yeah, it's nothing month to month, but look at it globally. That means that in a year, I'll be getting 10 pounds. I'm already 215. 10 pounds would bring me to 225, which is also the reason why I do not have a weight goal. I don't want to be 230 or 240. I will keep growing and I will see where this bulk takes me. I've made the mistake in the past of wanting to be 225, 230, and every single time I just got fat because I lost sight of what matters, which is not the weight on the scale, but your performance in the gym and what the caloric surplus is doing for you. So you can expect to see my improvement in these coming logs. I'm going to continue posting them, of course. If you like these hypertrophy logs and you want to support my work, you can do so by donating or getting a membership on my Ko-fi page. It is always appreciated. And when it comes to the next episode, after an arm day and a leg day, the natural next candidate is going to be a push day. So the episode number 3 of the hypertrophy log is going to be focused on the chest. So I'll see you there. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.